We have hit 9 o'clock and we have 32 folks in the room. Why don't we go ahead and get started with this week's meeting of the Tacoma-Pierce County Coalition to End Homelessness? Rosemary, would you like to get us started?
Thank you, Rob, and welcome everyone to our open table, where we come to learn about resources and actions for responding to homelessness in Pierce County and renew our commitment to policies and actions that further safe and secure housing for all. We gather on the homelands of the Puyallup tribe of Indians who have stewarded this coastal home for thousands of years. We call ourselves to listen to and honor the voices and experiences of the indigenous peoples of this land and beyond. I often offer a favorite poem as a way to conclude these welcome messages, but today I want to focus on the poem itself. I shared a version of this a couple years ago, but bring the message back today as we witness the increasing threats to our already fragile safety net. We come here on Fridays from 9 to 11, or until 11:30 if we can stick around to think about planning future meetings. Some of us never miss unless we're sick or have to be somewhere else. We come when we're tired, when we don't have much hope, when we're outraged or discouraged, when we have new supplies or need them, to introduce new collaborators or bring news of people we know who have perhaps finally been able to find a place to live. We learn a lot, we listen a lot, and sometimes we get pretty hot about things. So in this poem titled Tired, African-American poet Langston Hughes sets a scene that seems familiar so many years after he wrote it, in 1930, when both persistent Jim Crow racism and the Great Depression made deep tiredness at the state of the world a predictable reaction. But as you'll see in this short poem, he doesn't let us stop at being tired. Here's the poem, Tired by Langston Hughes. I am so tired of waiting, aren't you, for the world to become good and beautiful and kind. Let us take a knife and cut the world in two and see what worms are eating at the rind. Hughes draws us in by the invitation to join him in criticizing a world that provides so many examples of oppression and injustice. He gently gets us on the same page with him, and we nod when he says, I'm so tired of waiting, aren't you? He draws us in more with positive words that follow. For the world to be good and beautiful and kind. It's clear what they mean and obvious when they're absent. And then he presents a challenging response to tiredness, not discouragement, not retreat, not helplessness. This is a more radical invitation. He says, let us take a knife and cut the world in two and see what worms are eating at the rind. Research and action, collective action. Let us take a knife, metaphorically violent action. Let us take up a knife and cut through what keeps us from seeing or telling or acting on the truths of our experience. And then the discovery of rottenness. Once we cut the world open together, what worms do we find and how should we respond? And how do we work together, jostling the constraints of our pasts and presents? How do we talk about the rottenness here in this public and publicly recorded space? We are advocates, nonprofit agency directors, street-level vendors, people with lived experience and the consequent trauma responses to that accompany that experience, employees of public agencies like cities and counties and libraries and courts who represent these organizations by our affiliations, even if we may disagree personally with certain policies, builders and real estate folks who want to collaborate but are not set up as charitable foundations, and faith community members and housed neighbors who witness the human suffering on the streets and share their time and resources. None of this is specific about how we should respond as a collective, and we're sure to make and surely have made mistakes in our time together. We may offend each other when we speak strongly out of our own deep tiredness at the persistent injustices leading to such deep suffering in our community. As a coalition, we're committed to inviting everyone to an open table and to engaging respectfully in this space, but it's a messy business. Our community norms may help, strategies for action may divide us. If we're going to examine the world, the worms gnawing at the rind of the world, we're going to have to keep working on being both truthful and graceful, giving grace to ourselves and others. Some weeks here are hard that way, and sometimes they keep us going. So welcome everybody to our work. So here we are, 54 of us, and we do ask you if you're new to the space, you may not know our norms for how we act together, but we ask you to for the Zoom norms, to keep ourselves on mute when we're not speaking, to use the raise hand function when we want to be recognized to speak, and to keep our videos off if we're doing something that might be distracting. But we encourage everyone to put your video on when you can so we can meet each other in this space and recognize each other on the street, which is a good thing I like to do anyway. And we also encourage everyone to use the chat as a place to ask questions if you're new, especially. There's all kinds of folks who will respond, and it's not disrespectful to engage in lots of personal discussion there. Know that the chat may be published, so if you want to do personal ones, those won't be if you want to directly to some individual person. And the other norms, I think, Rob, you probably put them in. I didn't look at the chat, but the community norms are there. And I think one of the things I'd like to suggest based on the message this morning is that we maybe think together about those in a more structured way in the near future to see how they may reflect what we're doing and what we might change to make ourselves stronger. So you might come to a steering committee meeting on a Wednesday as an opportunity to talk about that, but we'll let you know more about when we'll take that up. Anyway, what this purpose of this time is also is to make sure that we've welcomed those of you who may be coming back from a long time away or are new. So we just take a few minutes for you to say your name and if you're affiliated with a group, what that group might be. And if you're interested in having that group present or you're interested in presenting to us what your group does, Teresa Power Judas arranges these partner spotlights that we do are about 5-minute presentations. You can contact her in the chat and then talk about that later. So if there's anybody new here who would like to say hello, it's not anything formal, just to let us know that you're joining us. And I'll let Rob see if he sees anyone out there ready to say hello.
Yeah, and as a reminder, you can use the raise hand function or just raise your hand. And Latasha, I saw you raise your hand.
Good morning, everyone. For some reason, I wasn't locating the raise your hand. My name is Latasha Palmer. I'm running for Tacoma City Council, position 6. I was invited by Sally. I've heard amazing things about your work, and so very curious to see what you all are doing and what I can do to participate and help.
Welcome, Natasha. It's nice to have you here.
Thank you.
Jesus.
Yeah, hi, my name is Jesus Carlos. I am a member or a commissioner of the Tacoma Human Services Commission, and I am running for Tacoma mayor.
Welcome, Jesus. It's wonderful to have you here too. Kathleen.
All right. Let me figure out how to lower this. My name's Kathleen, and I'm just a CNA. I'll be a CNA for 21 years, and I volunteer for Tacoma Rescue Mission. I do baking for, excuse me, Adams Family Campus, and I also do baking for my sister's pantry. I have degrees through Augusta Escoffier Culinary Arts College. So I thought I'd pop in and see what goes on. So God has called me to feed the homeless, and I have a heart for people. So here I am. So if I can be of help, then that's what I'm about.
Welcome, Kathleen. We really appreciate your work, and you're in the right place.
Thank you.
All right. Well, the chat is open too. If you weren't able to speak out and get those hand functions and all those things to work, introduce yourself in the chat and let us know what you're interested in, and somebody will be responding. So we'll give it back to you, Rob, and welcome everybody.
Thank you, Rosemary, as always, for us getting us off to a thoughtful start to another weekly meeting of the coalition. So let's get started with the segment that we do every week at the beginning of the meeting, and that is to talk about what folks are seeing on the streets this week. The focus of this segment is to provide some space for folks to share changes they're seeing in the community, to raise up some specific needs for supporting people who are currently homeless in our communities, and to see if what the 64 of us in this room might be able to do to respond to some of those needs. I will say that we ask folks not to share exact locations where people are, just because we worry about people being targeted as a result of naming those places. But otherwise, if you do have concern about a specific location, you can send me a direct message in the chat, and I can reach out to some outreach folks to get out to that location that you have a concern about. So, real quickly, I will say that obviously we have shifted in our weather context, and we had temperatures that were in the 80s a couple of days ago. Temperatures forecast to be around 80 again today. Earlier in the week, we had our first hot weather check-in meeting in the morning. Um, Although that day the forecast actually shifted and didn't reach as high of a concern level using the National Weather Service heat risk maps. But it's a good reminder that this is the time to have hot weather supplies on hand, because that forecast can shift pretty quickly. So let me step aside and invite folks to share what they're seeing in their communities and raise up any concerns. And feel free to just come off mute or raise your hand, whichever works. And I see Sally's hand up first.
So, in the general mid-hilltop area, even single tents and maybe two tents are being swept within just a few days of getting established. So it makes finding people harder. I was out about 6 o'clock this morning and they only with water because it's going to get to be 80 today. But I was concerned as people were asleep, so it was good to be able to leave water for them, but I'm concerned about how they'll do during the day, and then they just keep moving around. So for people who are out trying to find people, the groups seem to be getting smaller and harder to find. So I just wanted to mention that if people are going out this weekend. Thank you.
Yeah, thank you, Sally. And also, people are being scattered all across the city as well. So I know when I'm out in the community, I'm seeing a lot more folks in parts of towns where I didn't typically see people before. And that's because they've been pushed out of the camping ban zones. Anyone else with updates on what they're seeing on the streets or any concerns across the entire county? Yeah, Carrie?
Those biannual DSHS deadlines are coming up. June 15th is a big one. June and December 15th seem to be big ones. I'm seeing a lot of people's mail just like scattered, like finding people's mail from DSHS, and it's saying that their SSI is going to be cut if they don't respond.
Mhm.
And so I'm not sure if people are getting their mail forwarded or what's going on, but if you have access to anyone, maybe check in with them, see when's the last time they touch base with DSHS, make sure, because as grim as things already are, I can't even imagine somebody losing things completely. And it's going to be a lot harder and longer to get them back if they're taken away with the backlogs.
Yeah, thank you, Carrie. Anyone else with observations of what they're seeing happening in their neighborhoods and any concerns? All right, well, we can continue the conversation about particular neighborhood concerns in the chat. Let's go ahead, even though we're a little ahead of time, and shift to the partner spotlight for today. And today's partner spotlight is we've invited Fatima and Nick from Catholic Community Services to talk about some changes coming up at the day centers that are currently run by CCS. So I'm not sure if I saw Fatima in the room, but I did see Nick. So I'll hand it over to the two of you. And I don't know, Nick, if you want to get started first. There you are, Fatima. Good to see you.
Sorry, my computer kept on freezing.
No problem. So I
Fatima,
don't know how either one
did
of
you
you
want
want
to
to start
start,
it.
Fatima, or?
Yeah, I can start. So, some of the changes we have, due to some of our funding, issues that we have had to lay off some staff for our day center. And we're moving over our case management that we weren't getting funding for, over to our day center so that they will kind of it's going to be a mix of them being generalists and case managers. And it's kind of not far from what we initially, before we had to make funding cuts, we were looking to do because we were wanting to do more intense case management similar to the stability site. But at the time we were thinking we would have more generalists on the floor that we can train so that we can have case managers and generalists, then train our generalists up to extra case managers. But that was not possible. So because of that, we will have less people on the floor to basically manage the day center. But we still want to provide services for people in the public. So some of the changes is none of these changes are going to affect the overnight. At this time, the overnight staff, shelter guests, they'll still be able to be in the shelter 24/7 right at this time. But for the public, we usually open from 7 a.m. to 4 p.m. 7 days a week. Right now, some of the changes is we're only going to be open to the public specifically during breakfast, which is at 8:30, and that's going to be for like an hour and a half, and then for lunch, which is at 12. Again, it will be like an hour and a half open up for the public to come in and eat. And they'll be able to still get resources, clothing, and their mail during those times. But in between those times, we will be closing back to the public, except for if they need to meet with a nurse, the nurse that we have on site. And then if they sign up for this new program that we were doing, which isn't going to be as intense as we were hoping for, but we're going to be providing informational sessions some days of the week. And so guests who are outside guests will be able to sign up to attend those. And we're not exactly sure how it was going to, we were planning on having 2 a day to fill in the times between lunch and breakfast and lunch, but because of having to cut again, we weren't able to do that. So we are still working on how many of those we'll be providing during the week. And I will, as soon as I get that information, I will get back to you. And this is some of the first cuts we're having. We will be looking, we possibly have to make some cuts during staffing for the overnight shelter, but we're not sure what that looks like. So I'll have to come to you guys later on to tell you what that looks like and if it does affect our clients or not. So right at this time, it doesn't affect the clients, but we don't know because our full budget for a Nativity House shelter is like $5 million, and with a deficit of almost $2 million, and we have to cut basically $2 million. So we're trying to figure out how we can do that and not have it affect the clients that we have right now. So I will pass it on to Nick.
And one quick question for you,
Yes.
Fatima, before, so the timing for when the shift to this
It will be
different
July
service
1st.
model?
July 1st.
Okay,
It's with the
great.
new fiscal year.
Got it. Sorry, Nick, go ahead.
Yeah, no problem. Similar to Fatima, and of course, as part of the same larger organization, Family Housing Network, and in particular, our day centers facing similar loss of funding reductions, pressure to, make sure that we're able to make sound financial choices that allow us to be there in the future. Unfortunately, we've come to the determination that we need to close the Family Housing Network Day Center. That also is going to start July 1st. Family Housing Network and the Day Center is much smaller than the Nativity House Day Center. Yeah, it's a very disappointing and saddening thing. As big as a psychological impact that this might be on the community, I'm actually expecting a far smaller impact on people. Uh, and what I mean is, we have noticed over the past year, maybe a little bit longer, that the number of people coming to use our family day center is really has really fallen off. We had, I believe it was a more than a year ago. I'm getting my time mixed up. Maybe 18 months ago, we had a big freeze, and of course, we had pipes burst and everything was flooded, and we had to significantly curtail operations at the day center there. And we really never had the attendance come back from that. There have been hours and hours where we didn't have anybody showing up at the day center. We had staff, operating the facility with nobody in it. I look forward to the time in the future when we can FHN can potentially restore these services, but for the foreseeable future, it's just not possible for us to continue to operate with significant losses. So that is my update and share. At this point, the rest of the services of Family Housing Network, SSVF, the Rapid Rehousing Program, the Coordinated Entry Program, the Permanent Supportive Housing Program, those are all at this point not affected by the funding reductions. So.
And I did want to say, along with Nick having to close, it's not just a Pierce County thing. Our other CCS, some of our other CCS programs, because of the same issues with funding restraints and decreases or not getting funded for certain things, are gonna have, like, one of our Feed the Hungry in Thurston County is having to close down July 1st also. And some of our programs in King County are facing the same issue. So it's it's a widespread thing. And we also have just recently got got a new president. And she is working with us all to try to still do our programs and do it be able to steward our programs correctly, and to make sure that, because for years we've been doing it with a growing deficit, and it's been hindering our program, because we can't increase or grow when you have this huge deficit to change our programs. And so we're trying to be fiscally aware of what's going on and try to do it in a way that we still can serve people, but realizing that we don't have that money. So we have to be smart about how we do that.
Great. Thank you, Fatima and Nick. Can the two of you take some questions from folks? I see a couple hands up already. Go ahead, Lisa.
Hi there. I just have a question about the day center, the Family Housing Network. Are the people still going to be able to come in? Probably not. I'm probably answering my own question, but to take showers and do laundry, or is it just the kitchen that's closed? Is there a way to get like on a list to come in and do laundry and shower still?
No, that is actually, the laundry and showers are kind of the core, some
Yeah.
of the core functions. We just don't have the money to pay staff to be able to do that. As many folks know, staffing is the I don't know, 80-90%
sure.
of the cost of everything. So that's not going to be possible.
Okay. And I'm guessing this is all because of what's happening in our federal government. Am I right?
I would say that it's a complex story, but basically, from the real close in look, when I look at my projected budgets and I see deficits, and I go to my boss and I say, I don't see a way to get this to be a balanced budget, and he says, well, in the past we've been able to use discretionary spending to support that, but given the complex uncertainties in state budgets, federal budgets, we're just not in a position to be able to do that anymore. So I would say that the things going on at the federal level are the final things that pushed us over the edge. But we were, I would say, and Fatima, correct me if I'm wrong, that both day centers were significantly underfunded before things happened on the federal level, and it's just sort of a compounding effect.
Gotcha.
Yeah, it's basically exacerbated the problem that we were already having, especially
Yeah.
with the cost of living and things, and our funding hasn't matched that. So we've had to make these drastic changes.
Yeah.
We're in a position to no longer, as an agency, be able to rely on other historically stronger parts of our organization to provide discretionary spending to support us. That's closed off to us now, which means that very important, very meaningful services like Fatima's and mine have to find enough resources to support ourselves.
Right.
Yeah, and
Thank
we've
you.
also, for my end, I haven't really talked to Nick about it, but our programs are, some of our private funders have kind of switched where they're funding, and they're no longer funding us. They've looked to fund other places that have huge needs, but it's no longer adult homelessness. So we lost some of that extra, funding from private donors that we used to have too. So that's been an effect too, along with the government funding.
Yeah, thanks for that context. Teresa.
So first, I want to thank you for coming and say that I can tell that you are just as sad as others, and maybe more sad about the loss of these services, and that I, for one, will never blame somebody for providing services and no longer being able to provide them, which sometimes you get that in the community. So if you get it, I'm sorry that you get it. But I do want to say thank you for finding a way to keep the lunches and breakfast going. I'm imagining that will stretch you pretty far to pull that off. And I also am concerned about the Family Day Center, especially right now when we're facing this real uptick in evictions because of the delay because of a number of reasons, but there are going to be, as soon as the school year is ended, the evictions can go through. And also the fact that there are some family shelters closing down right now, kind of at the same time as the day center is closing. You have no control over that. My question, that was a long way to lead into this question. What would it take? What kind of funding is necessary to get the day center open, at least for the summer? Has anyone looked at that? Could we bang on any doors?
So I would have to say that in lead up to this decision that we made, we sought out the possibility of you know increasing funding from government sources, from other sources, and we did not receive information that led us to the conclusion that there was any real viable path to increasing funding. I would not be inclined, in part because I just had the heart-wrenching experience of giving notice to the employees that they're no longer going to have a job. I would not want to put them on a yo-yo of like, oh, we got funding for 3 months, and then people need to seek out livelihoods and find other jobs, and I don't find I wouldn't be confident in our ability to uh, deliver on a temporary funding thing. Yeah.
Mhm.
I should have said that as well. I'm another group of people who are really hurting right now are the people who've lost their jobs. So this is a group of folk who may have some positions open. I hope you'll make them loud and clear to the people who are looking for work.
Yeah, we at some of our other HAS programs have a few jobs that are the people who are laid off, or because there's multiple of them, are applying, are able to apply for and get hired, but we don't have a lot. So if anybody does have job openings and you want to email them to me so I can pass them on to my staff, that'd be great.
Likewise.
All right. Well, thank you for that call out for help. And I do see the question from Jake that just popped up in the chat regarding the family housing network. How do we repurpose, repartner, or find a way to keep the building open a couple times a week for laundry or shower services? Has there been any conversation about doing that in partnership, maybe?
I would be open to future conversations about that. And people can feel free to contact me offline.
Great. Thanks, Nick. Any other final questions for Fatima and Nick? So hopefully I don't know if these conversations are happening now, but hopefully there'll be some conversations with the city of Tacoma in particular. What this is going to mean is a shift of people uh, who no longer have a stable place to stay, especially at the day center downtown during the day. So probably more people on the street between meals. So hopefully there are good conversations, constructive conversations taking place with city folks about how to support those folks and and as they're out in the community there. And appreciate all the feedback in the chat as well. So thanks everybody. That can continue. Let's go ahead and shift to a different but oddly connected conversation that Garrett was going to share with us. Some information that he's pulled together in a tool regarding where our community currently spends funds for homeless response.
Thanks, Rob.
Yeah.
Yeah. So where does the money come from and where does it go? It's going to be this conversation. And as you said, oddly connected to this last conversation, I would like to throw out that I think it's embarrassing that our community is not able to continue to fund these cornerstone operations, the rescue mission, Nativity House. There's massive amounts of money that goes into building these facilities and to operating them. And our ability as a community to commit to continue funding operations. Salvation Army, same story, right? Like they put money into these programs. They put money into their building. They just did a remodel there, probably not just a couple years ago, but right. And if we want to continue to have nonprofits build buildings to serve our homeless, we've got to come up with a way to have a commitment to keeping those programs operating. So off soapbox and on to funding. I am putting a link into the chat. You can look at that now or later. I'm going to share my screen because Rob got me set up because he's such a good host. And I'm going to share this screen here. And this is a lot of information. Oh, okay, I got to get myself organized now. There you all are. I I've done this before. So in Garrett's view of the world, we need to know what community need is for homeless programs, right? That's one huge chunk of work that we need to do. And we've done it a number of times. Comprehensive Plan to End Homelessness was probably the last time we publicly published a lot of that data. We also need to know where all the money currently is coming in and what we're funding, right? And then there's a gap, and the goal is to figure out how to find money to close that gap. Unfortunately, we're going backwards right now with a lot of our funding, but that same task and that same process needs to exist. And we need to think carefully about how we're spending our money. As a community, we may need to make tough choices about whether we fund homeless programs or we fund food bank programs, right? Like there's a limited pot of money. But not any of that's really going to be this discussion. This discussion is, where does our money go? So this here is a look, and I puzzle as to why we don't do a better job collecting this. So I collected this as part of some work that I did for the Unified Regional Approach. I did some contract work for them that I'm done with now, but this was one of the products of that. And this is a look at where all the money I could find comes in. And so to collect this information, I got a great data dump from the county of all the stuff they fund. They're one of our largest funders. And so they gave me access to their financial system, which was super helpful. I got information from housing authorities, right? Money comes into the homeless system from a lot of places, right? Lots of money flows through the county. Lots of money comes out of the city of Tacoma. Lots of money comes from other sources. And some of that I have, and some of that I don't have. And some of that I don't quite have right. So sometimes I ask for information and I don't get it. And so I take a guess. Like SSVF, Supportive Services for Veteran Families, right? I think I asked Nick for that a little while ago. I haven't heard back. I don't know how much money they get to do that because it's a federal program and they fund Catholic Community Services of Western Washington for all of their veteran programs that the Catholic Community Services runs across Western Washington. So they don't break out King County versus Pierce, right? So some of the data is tough to get. And it takes people taking time that they oftentimes don't have because they've got other priorities. I also don't have any private money for the most part. So most programs do fundraising, they bring money in from other resources, and it doesn't enter into this because it's so many agencies and I just don't do it. Right. So some big ones would be great to have in here. But a lot of times, lots of our funding, right? And it makes this harder to do than other things like road construction, because when our government pays for road construction, there's no expectation that the road construction company is going to be fundraising for some of their own money to do the roads, right? We fully fund almost everything else in government except for social service programs, which is again super crappy. All right. I mean, can you imagine something going out where we're asking, hey, we'd love you to repave Pacific Avenue. We're going to give you 85% of the money, and you need to come up with 15% of the money yourself, right? There's no way anyone would ever do that. And as a matter of fact, we expect the construction company to make money. Okay, wow, this is like soapbox day for Garrett. Let's get back to the tool. So I told you a little bit. So I asked government agencies. I went through city budgets, every city budget in Pierce County. And then I just dug in my head for places I know money is. I did all of this when I worked for the county about 3 years ago. And so some of that I've done again. Why we don't have people tasked with doing this in our government agencies is one of those things. It's a matter of too limited resources and not enough time, I think. Because I think it's important. So what I've found, and I try to break things out into capital and operational. I have some capital money, but not all of it, right? So capital money means one-time money to build something or buy something, right? So capital money is different than our operational money. And I care the most about our operational money, even though capital money is important. And so you can see in this gray area, there's a couple areas that allow you to do some filtering. In this case, I default it to just operational because I think that's a good way to think about things. And I also have contract year. Contract year is really calendar year. That's a crappy label. So whenever I see a contract, I break it up into separate months, right? So a lot of times our contracts run on very different cycles, right? we'll talk SSVF all day today, right? Supportive Services for Veteran Families is funded on the federal fiscal year, October 1 through September 30th, right? So I take the total amount of that money, I divide it by 12, and I apply it to each month, right? So that gives me a window into it. We don't spend our money that way, right? Some months are heavier, some months are less heavy, right? But so that's the technique to try to accommodate the complexity of different funding cycles, right? So what this does is it'll let you see how much money, right? Pierce County Human Services, they're the funder, right? And it's a little misleading. This isn't Pierce County's money, right? This is money Pierce County gets from other places and distributes. But one fun thing about this is it's an interactive dashboard. So if you want to see a little bit more about what Pierce County is spending its money on, you can click on Pierce County and then it'll adjust all the bar graphs and you can see how they're spending their money and kind of where it comes from. So in the bottom left, I can see program type. Well, in 2024, they spent 16 million on shelter and 6.4 million on permanent housing and 9.3 million on rapid rehousing, right? You can see how all of that breaks down. And you can see who the grantees are, right? So, Lehigh is getting a lot of money. Catholic Community Services is getting a good chunk of money, right? You can see where that money goes. This one's kind of long and it's interesting. We can also see where the funding came from, right? So a lot of money came from the right-of-way funding, right? That's a huge chunk. Kind of crazy since that's so new. And it's what's right-of-way funding called now, Rob?
It's still called, I think it's still called the right-of-way funding, but it's
Okay.
been reduced significantly in the next budget.
Yeah. And some of it I didn't even try to break out. Like there's a bunch of money that comes
Oh
in
yeah,
the Pierce
Valerie says
County.
encampment resolution, but
There we go. Thank you. I knew they had a new name for it that is slightly more accurate, but also less accurate. One thing that I added that I hadn't done an awful lot with before is, and some things are kind of weird. Like, so Tacoma Housing Authority, some of their money comes to Pierce County Human Services, and some of their money goes directly to programs through their housing vouchers. So this also includes some funding we often don't include, which is the housing voucher that oftentimes supports our permanent supportive housing programs. Like, I guess we're talking Catholic Community Services today. So Guadalupe Vista is a project that they operate with almost no other funding except for, I mean, there is some other funding that comes in, but really it's the housing vouchers are able to pay for the building maintenance and utilities and all that and provide a tiny bit of case management support. Another thing about this is you can do some additional drilling down. Like if you wanted to take a look at what programs Lehigh works with, you can right click on one of these bars and then there's a little thing that says drill through and it'll take you to a screen and it'll lay out the exact amount of money, the contract start, the contract end, the funding type, and what project it's funding. And it's entirely possible some of this is wrong. So if you run a program and you're like, Garrett, that's not right, you screwed it up, let me know and I'll make corrections and then I'll get it all fixed. And you can also sort, right? So in this case, I could sort by just clicking on this, like any kind of spreadsheet in the modern world. And you can get a little bit better look at where the money's coming from and a little bit about the program type. There's also, and so that's kind of the core of it. So I think it's interesting kind of wander through. We often talk, so some ways that I use it. So I almost always make dashboards for myself, which is why they're not super end user friendly. But one thing is like, okay, we're talking about not getting continuum of care funding. How does that fit in, right? So continuum of care is right here. That's 4.3 million. And now I can take a look at who the funders are that receive continuum of care funding, or I could just go ahead and drill through and I could take a look at exactly what programs are being funded by the continuum of care funding. And that is helpful, I think, for us to understand the impact of something like that. And it's also something, so this is one of these mythology things. So I talk to a lot of politicians about homeless funding, and a lot of times they simply don't realize how their funding fits into the whole picture, right? So you'll talk to people at City of Tacoma, and they'll try to tell you that they spend more on homelessness than anybody else. And that's true, but it's also not true, right? So they're spending 11.6 million. They're spending almost nothing on these programs except for shelter. So it's true they spend the most money on shelter, especially prior to the right-of-way funding. They were spending more money on shelter. And it's because, I mean, you can come up with lots of explanations for it, right? Why would you spend money on shelter and nothing on permanent housing? Well, the county had been funding permanent housing. Shelter was an issue because homelessness is impacting the residents in Tacoma, and so that's where they focus their funding, right? That's the way my brain thinks about it. They might describe it otherwise, um, but you can see it's a much smaller portion. However, you can see where their money comes from. City of Tacoma General Fund, right? They're dipping into general fund. Ain't nobody else. Well, okay, a little bit. I think Puyallup got a little general fund money coming in. Occasionally, the county has a tiny amount, but in terms of I could use this money for anything, says the city of Tacoma. I'm going to choose to use it on homelessness. That's very different. And so you could say, in a way, right, they do spend more money. So county puts money through and works hard to get more money to run program. And Tacoma uses its own money in a way, right? They also use an awful lot of their mental health money, which Pierce County doesn't do in the same way either. And so those aren't accusations. Mental health money can be spent on mental health programs and not just on people experiencing homelessness. And that's a really good thing, right? Just like we could take opioid money and we could fund shelter, or we could fund treatment programs. We could do all kinds of things with opioid money and they would all be good things, right? So not making any accusations. You can also switch over and look at different years and see how money was functioning in different years. Right, you can see things were different before right-of-way money back in 2023. You can also look at how we spend some of our looser money, right? Document recording fee. This funds an awful lot of things. This is the easiest money for the county to spend. It's money that comes directly to the county through a certain tax, and it has almost no strings attached. And so that's often used for odd little things. Like when I worked for the county, I was paid with document recording fee money, right? Because that was the fund that allowed it most easily. So it'd be great to have all kinds of information about where these funds come from. So information I'm missing, I don't think I got information from the Washington State Department of Veteran Affairs. They get a lot of federal money to run Roosevelt Barracks. And sometimes it's really hard to separate Pierce County from the rest of operations, right? County lines exist in ways that are helpful and ways that are really unhelpful, right? We don't include what Auburn does. Auburn's a little bit in Pierce County, right? The way Roosevelt Barracks is operated, they provide services to veterans in Pierce County and outside of Pierce County, right? Washington State Department of Veteran Affairs has a program located in Pierce County, but it serves folks outside of it, just like people in Pierce County go to the VA in Seattle, just like they go to the VA facility in Port Orchard, Bremerton, wherever that one is. And so sometimes these lines make it tough. Sometimes funding comes to a program and we break down programs differently within our database systems, and so they're tough to map. I also have a little thing about annual trends here. I can't remember what this is because I don't use it very much. But it makes it a little bit easier to see how money has been spent over time and is growing or shrinking over time, right? ARPA money really changed a lot. Right-of-way changed a lot, right? So Pierce County in 2021 had 20 million going in. All of a sudden in 2024, they got 40 million. And that's going to drop because ARPA money is going away and public right-of-way money is dropping a little bit. So programs are going to have to be reduced. But I think it's interesting to see that. Housing authorities, right? That's what they provided us, which is really interesting, right? They're spending a lot of money on vouchers. A lot of money that went to vouchers for public use is redirected to some of our project-based programs, right? New Lehigh building that's up in Lincoln has some project-based vouchers dedicated to homeless veterans, I think. And so that would be an example of that. And you can also, and you can futz around and just look at particular funding. If you just want to see how we're funding shelter over time, we can see, right, different funding, right, again. Not all this is perfect, but and I go back to my funding overview. So that's my story. Those were a lot of words. I haven't looked at chat at all.
I think people are in awe, but I'm sure that folks may have some questions. So let's carve out a little space for that.
And I'm going to try to find the chat. What's my chat window? Zoom, when I share my screen, everything doesn't need to move. I just want to say that again.
Anybody have any questions they want to raise? other than what's in the chat.
Oh, I got chat now.
Yeah, lots of praise for having the information. Can the link be reshared? Asks Mr. Yoder.
Oh yeah. I got this sucker out there now. And I've collected it all, so I actually have the right to share it. Yeah. I got a lot of cool HMIS data, but I'm not allowed to share it. So
Right.
not allowed. I have to run it by the county and get, it's not that they bar it, it's just there's a review process. But this one doesn't need it.
Great.
Yeah,
Rosemary has her hand.
I'd also say when we talk about continuum of care money, some of our money comes into Pierce County that's actually money allocated to Pierce County, Lakewood, Puyallup, and the city of Tacoma, right? That sort of grouping money comes, and it's traditionally gone through Pierce County, and Pierce County controls it. So it's really all those other groups of money, and typically in the granting of the money, representatives from those jurisdictions are involved in the granting process, but the contract work all goes through the county, and so we call it county money. And it's all complicated, right? Which is good and it's bad.
Go ahead, Rosemary.
So I have a quick, maybe it's not a quick question, but you've talked some about data you wished you had available. And I was thinking if we were going to do alternative imagination about what we should fund to make a dent in the problems, what other groups do we need to get information from so we have more ability to do that? I was thinking about that unified budget problem that Michael Muir always reports, and I just wonder what thoughts this project had brought to you in terms of that kind of stuff.
Well, so I stop collecting data when it gets hard in smaller amounts, right? So, like I know, so I'm on the board of the Furniture Bank. I know all of their money stuff. They support our homeless programs, right? There's still fees that we charge, right? But we've got money coming in. How would I include that? And would that be beneficial? It's absolutely local, private foundation money. And it's $1 million a year, it's millions of dollars a year that come in through their entrepreneurship we have, and through donations. That's absolutely supporting. It also supports immigrants. It supports a number of other things, mostly homeless though. And so so I'm not sure I'm answering your question, but how do you bring that in a healthy, useful way when there's so much of it, right? And I don't know the answer to that. So Apple Health, I'd love to get Apple Health data, right? So some of the ways Lehigh funds programs, Apple Health, Inside Passages, Pierce County uses Community CF. What's that state billing of Medicaid? Foundational Community Supports. They use Foundational
Right.
Community Supports funding, as does Comprehensive Life Resources, right? So there's some other fundings that flow in that are hard for me to feel good about bugging those agencies to get that information when I'm not sure it's enough money to make a difference. But it is, right? So is this 75? So that's the other thing. Like, how big is what I don't have? Do I have 95% or do I have 75% of the funding? I'd probably say I've got like 80% of the funding. This is just gut feel. I think agencies have other revenue streams that might just be too cumbersome to collect. So I don't know. So that's a lot. That's a lot of. I don't know that I answered your question, Rosemary. But the ones I really want are the federal money.
Yeah.
And I think that private money is significant, but it's not that significant in terms of ongoing, right? A lot of times it funds capital things and not operations. Cheney Foundation's great about doing small operational things or funding. Like there's some other that I think that don't mind doing operations because operations isn't sexy, right? Oh, let's pay 10% of Nativity House's operations, right? Nobody gets lit up like that, like they should, because that's an amazing thing to support. Or did I
Let's see, we
waffle
got
through
a
that?
couple more hands up. Christine and then Nick.
Thanks so much for all your work on this, Garrett. This is so impressive. I can't wait to dig through it. I was really looking forward to this. I just wondered if you could give us your TLDR in terms of what funds we have and how we're using them.
Well, we spend a lot on shelter. So we probably spend 50-50 shelter and permanent housing programs. And that's probably not a bad mix. And then we got a lot of other small things that could fund more permanent housing or shelter. Those are the two things that I think are really important. You can argue that street outreach and some other things are too, but that's my too long to read. And most of it comes from federal sources that and our local sources, right? So our main taxing streams are where we get our money. And I would also say, looking at what we get funded from, that that foundations and philanthropic will not fund our homeless system in any significant way. It's important. It does great stuff for projects to keep something healthy, but as a system, right, that's something agencies should look to supplement. We really should be funding it with taxes.
Nick, I see your hand next.
Yeah, so Garrett, I'll just apologize for not being able to respond to you in my first year of taking on the filling Ellen Brown's big shoes to fill at Family Housing Network. I wasn't able to prioritize responding to you given all the stuff I had to be tackling. The question that I have for you is maybe a question for you, maybe a question for everybody, but so this is a really great, and I think you began to touch on it a little bit. You shared an amazing look at sort of where our current investments are. What do you know, or what can you say about if we imagined this whole thing as a big soundboard and there were different knobs and we could change things, uh, you know, what what do we know about what we could do differently? I mean, obviously more money would be better, but if we were just talking about investing the same amount of money, do we know if we did something different, it would have different results? And what that are? Is there information available somewhere else about what we could do differently and what that means? I realize that's kind of a big question, but it's what occurs to me.
Have you ever seen my little tool? So this has to get updated. This is from 2021. This is the third version I've made of if you change. So basically it models what homelessness looks like in Pierce County. I'm going to come and do this next month when I get my data all in it. This is a model that predicts how many people are going to be homeless in Pierce County. So the one number that matters to me in Pierce County, how many people are homeless right now? I want that number to go to 0, right? Or functional 0. And so this models basically what it would look like at particular funding levels. Okay, well, what if I added, instead of $8 million into rapid rehousing, what if I turn this dial up to $18 million in rapid rehousing? And then what would my homelessness look like in Pierce County, right? So so I'm totally in on how do we connect all of this funding information to what we fund and how that impacts the most number of people in the most positive way. And some of the things, anyway, I'm going to redo this, but yes, I think about this all the time, and that's probably for another day. But
is that tool available online like your Power BI is?
Yes, it is. And if I ever can find chat again, stupid Zoom.
Yeah, try doing all this on Teams. So while you're doing that, I see a couple more hands up. Carrie, you're first, and then Whitney.
How much would be the tipping point? You seem a little bit dismissive and questioning of private funds. I'm not talking about the foundations or the people with millions of dollars. I'm talking about everyday people like me and you. Just ponying up a certain amount, like a Patreon model or something like that, which we see almost every other sector moving to. What would be that tipping point where the public could pony up money? I know you say it'll never be enough, but
$100 per person in Pierce County every year. That's all I want.
You want what?
$100 per person in Pierce County every year. That's $100 million. Add that to our 60 million now, and we would be able to operate enough shelter so that when somebody became homeless, they would get immediate access to shelter and they would get immediate access to the appropriate permanent housing program. You'd have to have some capital to build some more permanent supportive housing facilities for project based, but other than
Yep.
that, that's the nutshell. That's what that model will tell you. The other one, as soon as I get it updated, but you can look at it now. It's $160 million system is what we need. 100 million people. I mean, a million people in the county. That's $100 each for $100 million a year.
And actually, that's consistent with what when you were working for the county, creating the comprehensive plan to end homelessness, there was that funding exercise you did. That was essentially what the delta was around an additional $100 million.
And when you look at the number of people homeless in Pierce County, all that ARPA money flowing in, it changed things, right? Homelessness flatlined in Pierce County. And it doesn't seem like, so that's what the data said. God only knows what real life is, right? Like the disconnect between the data I have access to and what really happens, I get that, right? But if I use all the tools at my disposal, everybody's analysis of homelessness and my own, right, and try to anchor it with some things. I've got checksums kind of, right, that look at things that micro let's see, subsections, right, that I am more confident in, and then extrapolating from that, blah 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 blah. I think that extra money made a difference. The extra shelter, the extra rapid rehousing made a difference, and it's a bummer to see that amount of funding dropping off because we don't have ARPA, and because we have sociopathic autocrat in power in DC. Oops, sorry, not a safe space anymore, but there we are.
Whitney, you're next.
Thanks, Rob. Garrett, this is phenomenal. I really appreciate the work you put into it. My question is, I know that the school district in Tacoma and many of the other school districts do some programs to support their students experiencing homelessness. So my question is, was that part of your analysis? Is this part or that sort of fall under the many different programs that are drops in the bucket and we're not trying to figure out how to work with them? I know in Tacoma the student population experience it is quite high, so I'm just curious if you have any insight onto where that fits in the ecosystem.
Yeah, so funding has gone into programs with so Tacoma School District, for instance, right? Tacoma Housing Authority money came in there, that old McCarver program, and that got revamped. So that money did flow. That's actually the Housing Authority money that flowed through the county was for the McCarver and then whatever that McCarver program became. But really they do an awful lot around not literally homeless, right? So people that are couch surfing and all that, which is a big deal, right? Like the impact in your education of a third grader moving from household to household is the same impact as being literally homeless, right? Like all of that matters and it's important. But in terms of the money coming in, I don't think it's very significant, but I don't have it here. And so, I don't know if the gal out in East Pierce County might chime in a little bit, but the money numbers haven't been that big. It's a lot of directing. It's a lot of the 3 McKinney-Vento staff in the city of the Tacoma School District, right, for tens of thousands of students, right? But I try to bring that data in. It's just OSPI doesn't give amazing public data on that, and it's not a lot of literal in their system. But I think people lie to the school district because of the sense of risk associated with it. So I think a lot of times they may be in their car, but they're not identifying that way. So I even think McKinney-Vento numbers are higher. That was a ramble. I'm not sure I answered your question. So no, I don't have direct money from them, but I don't think it's much based on my historical research, but it could be.
Thanks, I appreciate it.
And there's 16, 18 school districts in Pierce County. And so checking in on each one, right, would be useful. And I look at the data from OSPI, but.
All right. Well, I think a lot of folks have things to chew on and play around with the models. So, and we will definitely book you. We'll figure out the timing, Garrett, to come back and talk about the other model that you're going to update. I do think we probably should move on to other topics, but the conversation can certainly continue in the chat. Thanks, Garrett, for being willing to share this and so publicly, and for all that you continued to do.
You're welcome. Always happy to chat. Homeless data.
Now we just need happier homeless data. All right, so why don't we shift to our regular updates from government partners, and we can get started with updates from the city of Tacoma. Welcome back, Caleb. I know you had to leave and come back, so.
Yeah, thanks, Rob. Appreciate it. Good morning, everyone. Just a couple of updates to flag for you all. This Tuesday for the Committee of the Whole, Council will be hearing an update on kind of where the city is at with their funds for opioid response from the settlement funds that the city receives. And so we'll just be talking a little bit about update and next steps for what we've been doing with the funds up until this point and kind of what our plan is for the rest of them. The city is roughly receiving about 14 million over a 17-year time span. So we haven't received all the dollars. We'll receive them in increments each year, depending on kind of the suit and the agreements with each kind of entity. And so it's kind of spread out a little bit differently. And so we'll brief council on that. And then also for your awareness, the update on the TMC 819, the camping ordinance with personal property plus strategy update will be in a memo form, and it will not go to a council in terms of a briefing. We expect it to come out either next Friday or the Friday after. The data is actually collected on the 1st of the month, and so it's kind of a tight timeline to turn it around to brief council, depending on what the data shows. So I will keep you all up to date on that next Friday as well. And that's kind of the two biggest ones. I think the third is we're still finalizing what we will receive for shelter extension for our temporary and emergency sites. What I can share now is it looks like we are getting some money, but not all of it. So we'll be able to extend some sites. Currently, I have a memo finishing up so that the city manager can be briefed on staff's recommendations based on what we expect to receive and what are our most critical sites. As kind of setting the stage for you all to know, and just kind of a reminder, the city uses kind of a three-legged stool approach with a shelter setup, one of them being available funding, the second being a capable provider, and third being a feasible site. And so we'll continue to use that same as we make those recommendations for the future. So that's the update for us, and I hope to have a final which shelters will probably be getting funding next week, along with how much.
Thank you, Caleb. Any questions for folks from the city of Tacoma? I guess one I would have, Caleb, is in regard to the changes that are going to happen with the day centers at Catholic Community Services and Nativity House downtown, as well as the Family Housing Network. Has there been conversation about alternative options for folks when they are no longer going to be able to be indoors at the day center, and especially when we run into inclement weather, heat this summer, but even more concerning, cold next winter?
Yeah, thanks, Rob. Absolutely. Yeah, we've definitely been having conversations. One person I will shout out on the call because she's also on the screen is Jan, doing a great job at advocating on behalf of that too as well. We always appreciate that, Jan. Yeah, I think it is critical to think about, especially during coming into the warmer months with inclement weather response. And so we will be looking at alternative locations to see if what we can support with the funding that we do have. As you all know, some of the city funding that we have allocated in the past has come from our federal partners, CDBG and ESG dollars. As you all know, that is a very touchy topic right now. So we'll continue to monitor how much we'll receive. We're not able to do any final agreements because we don't have our grant agreement yet from HUD on the exact numbers and what the expectations are. And so we'll work in kind of good faith to look like we utilize those dollars. The city also, though, did plan with other contingency funds through our MSED dollars and our general fund dollars to also support. So we'll utilize everything we can now and then look at what we can ask for council for the future, just to make sure we're addressing any critical issues. I think part of it is conversations with CCS is making sure we understand who is having the biggest impact and not going to be served now, and then how can we set up a location to serve those folks primarily, just to make sure we're trying to maintain that service deliverable, and then seeing if maybe we can even enhance services. So that's what we'll be looking at. I also know that the county will be coming out with their inclement weather plans for the future. And so we'll make sure that we as a city will brief our leadership and make recommendations on how, again, with the intention that we are aligning as much as we can with a unified approach. And so we'll make sure that we put that in part of the briefing process.
Great, thanks, Caleb. And I do note Sally asked a question in the chat you may want to address. Did all the residents at the Shiloh Baptist shelter that stood down on March 31st get stable housing, or are some still on the street?
So Shiloh, everybody had a referral to the end. I think we actually either transitioned everybody to a shelter or transitioned them to the city's stability site. And then I know even a couple, we got positive outcomes that they actually got housed pretty quickly after transitioning to the stability site. So we're always happy to hear that news. In terms of other updates, I know Alzheimer's a big one because that's a family shelter that we know we're standing down currently, regardless of funding from the state. And that location right now is down to 9 individuals, I believe 4 families. So we're continuing to work with them. I think that will also come into play with depending on the shelters that might be continuing on and making sure we can make appropriate referrals to as well. And that will be the same for TRMs and Lehigh and Bethlehem and Holy Rosary, depending on and Brotherhood Rise, depending on recommendations from that. So we'll use that same and we'll do the best that we can to make all of those referrals. And it is the city's goal to make sure everybody has a place to go.
Thanks, Caleb. Let's shift over to updates from Pierce County Human Services. Hi,
Morning.
Valerie.
Hi. Hello from my couch, still week 5. So walking is a benefit, by the way. So and a lot of the County, not handicap accessible, just FYI. I've been stuck in 2 bathrooms so far at restaurants. So something else for us to work on when y'all's free time. So Valerie, Pierce County Human Services, and a couple updates. Devin is in interviews today, so I am jumping in. First, our new director of Human Services starts on Monday. They selected Gary Gant from HUD, formerly of HUD, so that's going to give us some amazing insight. Super excited, tons of experience with behavioral health and homeless services and affordable housing and all the things. So I expect to see Gary probably attending these meetings and at least getting some catch up and being a part of your group sooner rather than later. And then Anchor Community Initiative. So we release funding. We do not have our state grant yet, but we're going ahead and release funding just in case. 4 providers were selected for that. So Multicultural Family Hope Center and Tacoma Community House Reach were selected for street outreach, and that is 12 to 24-year-olds for street outreach. And then Multicultural and Harbor Hope Center were selected for the young adult shelter. So congrats to all 4 of those successful applicants. Serious competition this year for those Anchor Community dollars. The Continuum of Care will be hosting a general membership meeting on June 18th from 10 to 12. It is virtual and in person. I will put the links into the chat so that you can attend in the addresses. And so that is a general membership open to the public. Anybody can come June 18th. HEN, which is Housing and Essential Needs, closed on Wednesday. We received 6 successful applicants. Those have been sent over to the application evaluation committee. And so they're scoring those now. So hopefully next couple weeks we'll have an announcement on the new HEN provider. It's been Sharon Care House for many, many years. So we'll have to see where it lands this year based on the scoring. And then YHDP, so Youth Homelessness Demonstration Project, again, do not have our grant agreement. It is HUD, but it is Tacoma, where they're doing very specific project types. So with YHDP, you have to do specific project types in your plan. So they have identified transitional housing to rapid, coordinated entry, and a service only project, which is a navigator And so that competition should be opening soon as well. And that is for households 24 and under, unaccompanied. So not families with adults in the household, everybody 24 and under. So we anticipate those dollars to be coming out in good faith, right? Like we're doing a whole lot of good faith stuff here at the county. And then last but not least, inclement weather policies and thresholds will be released soon. We got the sign off from the executives team yesterday. So that's super exciting. So I'll get those out to you all. It is a living document. So if we have our very first hot day and we're like, hey, this worked, this didn't work, we're going to change it. So that's going to be something that we go back to that task force with and say, let's work on this. What worked, what didn't, what barriers did we put into place, and how can we do better? And so working on all of that. Yesterday, I also sent out a message to some of our larger inclement weather providers saying, what do you need now to be ready for the heat? So we're going to be placing an order to get some water, to get some different supplies ready. And so I did an email out to, I think, 8 or 9 different entities throughout the entire county saying, what do you need for inclement weather so that we can be ready before this RFP comes out for inclement weather dollars. So that way everything's just ready to go, right? Like we have water. We have to figure out a way to, I'm figuring out a way to cool water. I haven't gotten there yet, but I'm working on some options. And then last but not least, we're looking for some sites that are just notoriously open anyway. So one of the things we want to do is make sure we can tell folks like these are the libraries, these are the hours, these are the gyms that are open to people experiencing homelessness, and these are the ones you need IDs at. These are the, all the options, like super creative thinking, so that way we can include them. So if you know of some places that maybe I haven't thought of, shoot me an email. I'll put it in the chat in case you don't already have it, so that way we can get that list. I want to have a massive list so that way folks can go to their location, their city, and it will drop down options for folks to go in and get cooled off on. So restarting that. We started it before, had surgery, brain's been a little foggy, restarting it again. So if you know some stuff, let me know. I will add it happily to our list. Otherwise, Google and I are going to be super close because I can't drive. And I'm happy to take any questions, concerns, comments, and I will say if I'm not allowed to respond to something. Hi, Courtney.
Yeah, Courtney.
Hi, Valerie. I think Devin needed to hear the Implementation Advisory Board meeting next Friday. I believe on the agenda will be a 211 update, and but then this week, a little birdie pointed out some content from the previous Pierce County Council meeting of some kind. It might have been a committee, it might have been, I'm not sure, or a study session. But apparently the state is reviewing the 211 RFP process and looking to possibly make it a statewide 211 program and limiting it to 6 hours per workday. And so I was going to ask Devin to add that to the update at the IAB meeting next Friday. Please let me know if I need to make that request more formal.
Nope, I'll do it for you.
Okay, thank you. And so if you have anything to share about that or just encourage us to come to the IAB meeting for the update on that, I would like to hear more.
Yeah, I have not heard that yet. So I will get with Devin, point it out, and then obviously IABs, if it's open to the public, anyone should always attend, right? More voices, more change. And so I will make sure Devin has that information and is prepared for next week. Thank you, Garrett. No, I did not mention it because you know how I found out about it? When OpenGov sent me an email. So there is an there is an RFI, request for information, for a temporary medical respite site out in Parkland. So if you are not registered in OpenGov, please register in OpenGov so you get the same alerts that I do. But it is open for, I think, 35 more days. But it is for potential agencies who are interested in opening a temporary medical respite site, which we all know is desperately needed. So the county already has the building. I know, Jan, I had no idea. I got the email with everybody else in the world this morning. So Jan, if you need the link, let me know. I'll forward it over to you. But okay, I see your head shaking. I will send it to you. So I will get that out to you. But yeah, it looks really, really interesting. I don't know where the fund source is coming from. I don't know a whole lot of stuff, but I will see if I can find out. Thank you, Garrett. Appreciate that.
That's good trouble right there.
And I will say, you shouldn't look at shiny new things, county, when you can't pay for the things you already have. But
and if Valerie was in a different position, but she is staying in her current position.
Thanks, Valerie.
welcome.
Let's shift over to updates from the Tacoma Pierce County Health Department.
Hi, everyone. So it's Isaiah from the health department on the street medicine team. So I have a few updates. I will try to work backwards. So starting from Monday to today. So Monday we had our pilot deployment. So we were able to get myself, Charnay Ducrest, who is also on our outreach team, and our Dr. Joel to serve a couple of patients, providing, well, medical care. So that was really fantastic just to see how things were working and the operation flow. Tuesday, we have hired our ARNP, so the nurse practitioner, who is officially started, so she should be able to start also providing medical care as well. We are also updating our general electronic workflow, so we're refining our data collection tool. And once we also update our electronic health records workflow, we'll be having an online survey online for everyone to provide information on where to send potential outreach locations. Furthermore, we did outreach on Wednesday, so I went out with our nurse. We did some inclement weather work, so we gave out folks information on heat stroke and general heat risk, gave out water, gave out food, sunscreen, those kinds of typical things. And our full deployment schedule, so that means outreach, medical team, all that should be scheduled out through June 30th. And we're still waiting for our no-cost extension from the city of Tacoma. And also, one last thing, we have received some medical supplies thanks to the MRC, and we're inventorying and cataloging all that today. And that should be all of the information on my end. Are there any questions for me?
Not seeing any hands.
Okay. Well, I'll be here for the next, I guess, 40 minutes at least. So if folks have questions from the chat or an email, please let me know.
Thanks, Isaiah. And any updates from our friends at Pierce County Department of Emergency Management?
Good morning, Rob. This is Wyatt from DEM. The only update I have today is that we are working through our warm weather supplies to make sure that those are updated and replenished so that we're available to support any inclement weather events moving forward in the summer.
Great. Thank you, Wyatt. And yeah, we're keeping an eye on the forecast. I did see long-range forecasts that said warmer and drier is what's expected for our area this summer, but we'll see. All right, so looking at our agenda, we skipped over advocacy updates. So let's go back to that before we move on. Sally, can I turn to you for thoughts on local advocacy opportunities?
Yep. Thank you, Rob. First, thank you to Caleb for flagging the opioid settlement funding conversation that's going to happen Tuesday, June 3rd at the Tacoma City Council study session or committee of the whole. That should be a really interesting conversation. I'd urge people to watch that meeting or attend it or watch the video afterwards. And then the other thing that's emerging at the city is kind of in the formative stages at this point, but on June 17th at the committee of the whole meeting, there will be a discussion of whether Tacoma should consider joining a regional fire authority, which would mean combining with some other fire departments that are adjacent to us and creating a larger fire service entity, essentially. So that's in the very early stages, but it has significant implications. Fire department folks are utilized a lot in the homeless services work, and so I think we need to kind of pay attention to that. So that's the beginning conversation about that. I'd urge you to watch that one as well. At the county, there has been a challenge to the proposal to fly the Pride flag during Pride Month. And the ordinance that would, or the resolution that would prevent the Pride flag from being flown starts out in the Rules Committee on Monday, June 2nd, on its way eventually to the full council. So if that is an issue of interest to you, you might want to start following that one. On Tuesday, June 3rd, there is a very important Health and Human Services Committee meeting that focuses on homeless seniors and homeless people with disabilities. Some of us have been advocating forever to get that population focused on, and finally the committee is going to do it. Two of our members are going to be on a panel for that, Jan Runbeck and Jake Now. So I think it's going to be really useful. I would urge people to show up in person for that one if you can, or watch it online. That's really, really important. The other thing is that the county is also, through its committee of the whole process, starting to work on the budget for the next biennium, which would start January 1, 2026. There was a very important committee of the whole meeting this past Wednesday that you might want to watch the video of when it's up. And there's another one next week. And so if you're a budget nerd like I am, those meetings are fascinating to kind of see how the county's thinking about how it's going to do its budgeting and allocate its money in the new biennium. And I think that's going to affect all of us. And so urge people who are interested in that sort of thing to jump in and learn more about the county's budget. Okay, that's all. Thank you.
Thanks, Sally. And the only thing I would add is that at this next week's regular Tacoma City Council meeting in the evening, it is community forum, so there is an opportunity for folks to make public comment on anything that the city council has jurisdiction over. So that's an opportunity that we can avail ourselves of, either online or in person. Mary, I see your hand up.
Hi, I wanted to add one thing. Sally, you always do such a great job keeping tabs on what the county is up to. I listened to this meeting back from last week because I was out of town last week, and I heard that there was an interest in development regulation or zoning updates in the county. And so the Community Development and Environment Committee, I think that's what it's called, at the county is going to be looking at some development regulations updates next week, including for temporary housing communities and middle housing, I believe, and like a lot of other things. The ordinance is, I think, like 1,200 pages, but there is a summary document from Planning and Public Works that I can send. So I also just wanted to put that on your radar, since, you know, land use is adjacent but still important to these conversations. So I'll send that in the chat.
Awesome. Thank you, Mary. And yeah, we've been very interested in those temporary housing regulations for unincorporated Pierce County. So that'd be a good thing to keep track of. At the state and federal level, not thankfully, things are quietish at the state level. Clearly, you heard Caleb talking about the ongoing process for communities trying to access some of the funding that was set up in the next budget. So more to come from Caleb when that becomes more clear. But no real direct advocacy opportunities at state level right now. However, at the federal level, I mean, you can pick your battle right now. There's plenty of opportunities to make comment to your representatives in Washington, D.C., to urge them to continue to push the current administration to change its approach and stop taking resources away from the least of us across the country. So I'll mention that. I also will mention that I can't remember if it was Teresa or Rosemary dropped in the chat earlier today information about upcoming protest opportunities. So those things are always possible as well. I do urge, if people have an interest in particular actions like that they'd like to share during these coalition meetings, to please flag that. Send me an email. We can carve out time to allow some conversation about those things during these meetings as well. So that takes care of advocacy. The next thing that we had on our agenda was we haven't done a breakout for a while. So we wanted to do a breakout into small breakout rooms for folks to do some networking. And the topic we thought we would talk about today is we were thinking that Garrett's presentation about how we spend funding on the homelessness response system would be something that people might want to mull over in small breakout rooms for a few minutes. So why don't we spend the next 15 minutes? I'm going to create a number of small rooms, if I can remember how to do this. Let's see. And we will, let's see, I'll create 5 rooms. We've got about 42 of us remaining in the meeting. And why don't we go into those breakouts? We'll come back here at 10:44 and wrap up the rest of our meeting. So again, the topic is anything that surprised you from the information that Garrett shared about how we're spending our money, and how might things change if funding decreases as we're seeing in the community. So off we go to breakouts. Welcome back, everyone. Hopefully that was a refreshing time to be able to talk with folks in the smaller groups. And if you took any notes or had anything you'd like to share from your breakout session, just drop some notes in the chat. We'd love to see those. And we're gonna continue to, I think we have talked about doing a breakout session on another topic next week. As you probably know, if you've come to these meetings for a while, we haven't been doing these as regularly, but we're gonna start dropping these in here and there when the opportunity arises. So thank you, everybody. Let's move on to our final items in the agenda for today. In terms of committee updates, I don't think there's a lot to share there, although I will remind folks of the opportunities to attend other meetings for the coalition. As always, on Monday at noon, we have our Safe Sites for All meeting. That is a half hour, and then we shift gears and stay in the same room and have a meeting about advocacy and communications. We also have our weekly steering committee meetings that happen on Wednesdays from 3 to 4 in the afternoon. All the meeting links are on the pchomeless.org website. You don't have to be anybody special to come to the steering committee meetings. You show up and you're on the steering committee. So the focus there is really midweek update on what's happening in the community, and planning for these Friday meetings. And then the other meeting that we have is Thursday morning at 9:30 a.m. We have a small group of us getting together and working on the next version of the coalition website. And so you're welcome to join that as well if you have an interest in helping update the coalition website. Let's wrap up today's meeting with an opportunity for folks to share Good Trouble announcements and any success stories that they'd like to share. And I'll open the floor.
I can't find my hand to raise, so I'm just going to talk.
Go.
Ed Jacobs and I have been meeting every couple months with some staff from the county council's office and from the county executive's office, and also this last round happened yesterday or the day before, and the health department was there. So we're trying to get names of everyone who died in the last 3 months in Pierce County, and that's a slow process. Some changes to state systems occurred and our flow of information has changed a little bit. And so we are still working on that. We're giving them until August. So our next meeting's in August and we'll have another check-in. And if they haven't progressed terribly far, Ed Jacobs and I both decided that this was something worth burning political capital on. And so that got us, I think, meetings with council staff and with the council executive, and they care about this. So the medical examiner has been really helpful, but they don't have full access to it. Anyway, in August, hopefully we'll have some good news, or we'll have an ask. And that ask will be that we're going to start throwing pressure on state representatives to get the State Department of Health going more. And yeah, this really needs to be something that a government organization collects, right? Who died in Pierce County from homelessness, of what, and what were their names is not too much to ask. So that's basically our request. It shouldn't be work that Ed Jacobs does on his own. And so that's definitely something Ryan Mello's office cares about and something that the county council cares about. It's just a complicated problem and we may need some pressure applied. So just know that is on the horizon. I offer you a good time and hopefully we don't need it because the bureaucracies get their crap together. But Ed's been working on this a good bit, and so hats off to Ed. But we might need some more help.
Great. Yeah, thanks for that update. Anyone else with something they want to share for the good of the order? And lots of activity in the chat. Appreciate that. Teresa is busy.
That was cutting and pasting. It's a note about people are very welcome to join the League of Women Voters out on the June 14th. If you're unable to make it to Olympia and you'd still like to make a statement about the fact that we're really not interested in Kings, you are welcome to stop by. I put the information in the chat. It's right after our annual meeting, or we'd probably many of us be in Olympia ourselves.
Thank you, Teresa. All right. So, yes, Dr. Jarvie, go ahead.
I'm trying to read Christine and Teresa. Teresa, last week you said you needed a freezer for the common good supply closet. Do you still need that? Because I have an extra one. We have, well, we had some donated. They're brand new, very pretty, and they're for our kitchen, but it's too small for that purpose. So if you guys want a small upright freezer, let me know. My driver is not available in the mornings usually because there are autumn pickups, but in the afternoon sometime he can bring it over for you guys.
Well, that is lovely. I got a message from Don, who also has access to a freezer. And what I didn't know, because I spoke just with Jake, that Shalom at the church said they need to check out to be sure that the outlet that is in that supply closet can handle a freezer. So can I circle back? Depending on
yes, that's fine. It's still like it's in the box. It's still sitting in our.
That's lovely. Thank you so much.
And anytime you want, I can ask Lewis to bring it over for you guys. It's a 110. Like it's not a and we have a couple of them, in our pantry and stuff, but we had 4. But we don't need 4. So I have this one that is homeless and needs to be adopted by you guys.
Thank you. I will be in touch.
Great. And Oneida, I see your hand up.
So the No King rallies, I like to call it We the People. It will be taking place also at People's Park on the 14th.
Mm.
And yeah, Indivisible is a sponsor there. The time I think is to be determined, but probably midday-ish.
So it'd be cool if we'll have another meeting before. We'll have another meeting before that. So if you can bring that info, that would be great. So people, the more choices, the more places, the better.
True, very true.
All right. Any last items that folks want to share before we wrap up today's meeting? All right. Well, as always, we will have a small group of us staying on this Zoom call after a 5-minute break to do planning for upcoming weeks. If you want to join us, please stay on the call. For everyone else, I hope you have a good weekend. I mean, I hope those that stay on the call have a good weekend too. But have a great weekend, and we'll see you all next Friday. Thanks, everybody.